layout and design, and also building location. And what as developers and and owners and occupiers, what do people need to be most mindful of? I think that the floor flatness is obviously a great place to start.
So I'll admit to working for Amazon in 2017. I stood in a completed fulfillment centre in Manchester, and there was a heavy debate on floor flatness, and it was all, I'm sure it's still going on, but there was an issue with as they introduced new generations of robots. The newer robots, pretty clever things, worked out where the floor was not flat and would actually move away from that.
Yeah.
Plus, if they're carrying the shelving unit, as it went over a little bit of a bobble, obviously it moved, and occasionally you would have, one time, now being a bit over dramatic, but you would have the shelving units that could potentially hit each other. And a huge debate over it. It caused all sorts of ripples in the Amazon world. All the robotics specialists were out there demanding something that could not be achieved in probably the UK and Europe, because it was an American sort of specification. But where I'm going to with that, it did create, it raised the bar, it brought it to everyone's attention, and the specification and specialists. The concrete specialists in Europe and America came up with a solution that could be delivered and has been successfully in lots of the other robotic fulfillment centres. But it really, dictated the way it should go, and it was something totally new. They'd had an older robot that was quite happily going up and down and doing its thing. Somebody out there went, we've got this thing that's going to go faster, it's been more productive, and it's probably cheaper. We'll roll that out across Europe. And they hadn't actually thought, those slight, and of course the other thing was the construction materials that we use. So obviously in the UK, we're very steel frame driven. The one we were looking at, bizarrely, was a steel frame mezzanine with a timber floor, and all the tests had been done out, I think it was Boston, to sort of have a look at this type of timber and the way it was all laid, and do all these thousands and thousands of passes, and it was fine until you actually brought it into a finished solution, and it was it had to be overlaid eventually across the whole robotics floor, but that drove Amazon to the more concrete floor solutions. So apologies. And it's now their preference is the concrete floors, but you do get in the span between the columns you will get a slight natural
deviation,
and that was the difficulty. So they don't want the robots to do that, so it's getting to that FM2 whatever it is, the American equivalent.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, is how the way the technology is moving forward is actually dictating the design, the approach, the redesign of how the warehouse, how the building is required to be set up and built. And you can see that designs have changed over the years quite considerably. And probably more demand from tenants on how they want their warehouse to be operating and what they need. And that design change, it's simple saying it's not just sticking up a bit of steel frame and building it and there you go. It's not a totally bespoke solution, as automation becomes used and has an effect on the design.
Duncan, just out of interest, why is it easier to build a floor to that specification in the US versus the UK?
It's not easier. It's just they had stricter guidelines, but it got very technical and well beyond my capability to understand it. I was told that it's almost impossible to build to that sort of standard. The robotics guys were wanting something that was just super flat.
Doesn't exist. Yeah.
And you've got to come to a compromise of, what can you physically achieve in the way that construction and parts of the building come together. That's all now been achieved, and there's some very successful solutions now. But it does, it sort of dictates, so the operation of the building and the type of automation, robotics, whatever, dictates the solution of the actual design. And I always talk about, that when we build a warehouse or a logistics center, it's a shroud around an operation. So you've got to understand what happens inside first. You've got to understand what's the process and how many people and what's, any heavy equipment, whatever it is, or robots, is it mezzanines, and then work out what your box around it's going to be. And then when we were starting to talk about taller buildings, so there's in our normal sort of institutional standard warehouse, most of the operation is down at ground floor level. You might have racking and whatever. There's a certain amount of space volume that's not used. So if you start to introduce mezzanine floors, you can start going higher using the same footprint of the building. So each mezzanine floor is obviously going to give you sort of more capacity, more productivity, and I think that's where there's certainly that massive change. It was mentioned, I think, in the previous session that the higher we go, the more sort of e-commerce facilities, the more automation, mechanization, means we can go higher. We can start using the spaces more efficiently.
Yeah, no, I think that's always a really interesting point. When in my previous job, I worked for Prologis here and in the US for a little while, and certainly the idea of taller buildings and building buildings so that occupiers can use them volumetrically has been sort of talked about for a long time. It's also, can you rentalize that as well? Because clearly there's an additional cost from a construction perspective for going up that extra 2.5 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters. So far, I think occupiers have looked on that space. Obviously, there's a big benefit, isn't there, to occupying a 8-meter clear building or a 15-meter clear building. But if the rents are broadly the same, then you've got racking, and clearly, sort of material handling and things like that can go up to 20 meters now. It's the kit is there. A few years ago, kind of 15 felt as high as you could get, but obviously we keep pushing past that. But certainly when I was at PLD, we did a building for Sainsbury's a number of years ago that was in parks 30 meters clear, and that was fully automated. You don't even have roof lights or anything. It's just a kind of dark
big black box. I did one for Tesco.
Absolutely.
Whereabouts are you now, Paul? Sorry, we never asked.
No, so a Bridge Industrial. So I left Prologis end of last year and opened up a UK office for a US developer called Bridge, who were founded in 2000. So we got a small office in London, and we just bought our first site actually in Southall in West London. But our focus is very much inner M25, sort of infill urban logistics type opportunities is what we're sort of principally focused on.
And how do you see, Paul? How would the units you bought? Do you see introducing, or the tenants wanting more automation and are fully committed to that, or is it still a long way to convince people that's the right route? Or
certainly within the sort of urban logistics sector, Peter, less automation sort of demands are coming up. A lot of what we're looking at doing is really to serve last mile. So it's very much about just very quick throughput of goods. So people are happy to take kind of smaller spaces at higher sort of rental levels because they're going to make it back in the volume, and you're almost measuring your success on sort of time rather than cost. So you really want to be close to the pockets of consumption and the people that you're serving. But I think that as these facilities get busier and parcel volumes, if you're leasing a building to Amazon or a 3PL or a parcel carrier or something like that, they will bring mechanization in. A couple of years ago, I remember buying a building in Chessington, which was let to Hermes, which is servicing kind of a pocket of southwest London, and it's about as low tech as you can get. It's literally people pulling their cars up and they've got parcels just all over the car park, and people are just loading them in reverse order. So the first one in is the last one they'll drop off, and it takes them 2 hours to load up before they can leave. And you just look at that and you think, yeah, there's got to be some efficiency through automation in that sort of very manual, very intensive sort of wet, cold process. There's got to be a way of sort of speeding that up. Certainly with some of the work that we've done with DHL, I've seen them have sort of conveyors and things like that internally within a much bigger building where you can actually drive the vans in and just load them much quicker because they're getting pushed on through through kind of mechanized trays and things like that. So I think it will come, but at the moment, I think such is the volume that we're seeing through sort of internet-based delivery and the need to get it out. It might not be the quickest way, but the easiest way, and the way to kind of bring people on and train them is just do it by hand and just do it quickly. It's sort of still what's happening at the minute, but that'll evolve for sure. Yeah. It feels like it has to.
So an interesting. It's always the conversation, and again, I'm going back to sort of the automation side, and we operate drones.
Yeah,
and we work in the rail industry. Actually, we do a lot of geospatial data collection. So we go down the tracks and we're running basically flying and measuring the bolts and the welding joints. We've got a technique now that can actually get those accuracies that are required. And it's always an interesting conversation having operating and the team operating in these environments, how everybody's talking about drones and dropping off parcels, and I sort of have a wry smile. I just sort of think, my God, what a headache that would be. I mean, just on the legislation, the licensing, the technology still needs to develop. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on whether you saw that as a real something that is going to disrupt the market, that sort of delivery marketplace. My personal feeling is we're quite a number of years away from that, but it'd be good to get your thoughts on that.
No, I agree with you. It felt like more of a marketing gimmick, and I don't really see it being adopted sort of universally. What do you think, Duncan?
I can assess a lot of these things are, great ideas, and it's great that people are starting to talk about them. It does take some of the big players to sort of put something out there and go for it. And the big online retailers that are pushing the sort of the boundaries. We did look at it with one of our clients to on a roof of a warehouse, urban warehouse, to put a drone delivery system in there as a bit of a add-on, one of these little initiatives. What would be great. So we did a little bit of work behind it, and yet you're right. All the licenses next to London City Airport, and then you start to think, well, how okay, we can do that end, but this drone is going to go and deliver something. What happens if you live in a block of flats? So how's that going to get so you start opening up a can of worms. But if you don't start talking about these things now, maybe in 10 years' time, we'll be looking back and going, well, it's happened. And, just using drones for your stuff, to do surveys and things. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have thought of it.
Well, we've now got 5 pilots. So if you'd have asked me whether we'd have 5 pilots in the business 5 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. But that's the situation. We've got a fleet of drones, different types of drones, operating all around the country. And
I think it's brilliant. I love it. So we've got a company that does sort of aerial photography, interactive things. So large sites, hundreds of acres. They'll plot the drone in different areas, and you can click on a camera, and you can zoom around, and you can move the picture. It's really very simple stuff, but very effective. So whilst we've all been working at home, you can watch what's going on each week on the sites, and zoom in, zoom out, move around, move down, and people can sit in meetings and use that as a tool rather than walking around. So I think that's been a massive benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. I mean, one of the things that's really worked. I mean, we sort of worked with Network Rail to develop the system, mainly because of the health and safety benefits, that you could actually reduce the number of surveys or number of times you need to go onto the track, and possessions and things like that. So, there's other benefits that this technology brings along with it. It is interesting.
What's your thoughts about autonomous vehicles, HGVs? Because we talk about it with a lot of clients, and they all want to sort of tick the box to say that they're ready for electric HGVs, and they'll put in the infrastructure. When you actually look at what's required in power requirements, as we've talked about numerous times, power is probably at the top of the list for issues for any of these buildings, whether you've got automation or any sort of mechanization. If you start adding in, lots of MVAs for just 10, 15 vehicles, then you're talking about a totally different network. And PV panels, it's great that they, maybe again, once we get the technology becomes a lot more efficient, we can use PV to sort of charge up the vehicles. But it feels like, again, it's there. We might have the technology, but we're still sort of 10, 15 years away. What's everyone else's thoughts on HGVs?
I would agree with you. I think it goes back to your point, Duncan, on you do need to start talking about this and raising the profile. Is the technology there, and does it really reap the benefits that it says it is? I think it needs a lot more and a more detailed debate on it. But I think we're going to be pushed. We will be pushed that way, won't we? We will be.
Absolutely, I think. Legislation's going to push it that way, and everyone's sort of, talking about net zero buildings and in operation. And we've got to, people have got to start pushing the boat. I think, it will come. It's just not sure how quick.
It's about it. It's all about the infrastructure, isn't it? As you say, the power, the network of if it's charging points, if it's it's just all that needs to be put in place if you're going to go at a commercial scale, and it's just not there yet. But it does need that initiative and that push.
I think your point about autonomous vehicles, Duncan, is really, really interesting, because putting the power of they clearly will be electric, because there's going to be no combustion engines built in the countries there after 2030. So it feels as if that's probably the sort of time horizon. But I think for autonomous vehicles, the really interesting impact it's going to have is actually on the labour market, because a lot of occupiers and customers that we deal with, if you go to certain areas in Northampton or Lutterworth or places like that, you can't find HGV drivers. These aren't roles and skill sets that people are sort of leaving higher education and seeking to go into. There's quite a stark kind of age gap. So that's a skill set that we need more of, and we actually, year on year, there are less people doing it. So I think that autonomous vehicles will really sort of solve a problem in the labour market in that regard, and in theory, should be on time and perhaps more efficient and have less accidents and things like that. Particularly if you had a whole autonomous fleet. We were doing some work in my old role, and people are able to model those, and you can literally run them a metre apart, because you haven't got to worry about someone braking or someone doing something else, which is you take human error out of it, you can probably be a little bit quicker and efficient. And it also gives you particularly if these are electrics, you're not necessarily worried about fuel cost. Can you then actually locate these buildings, far further out, because you haven't got to worry about, people driving to them, or less people driving to and from them. And so then, you can build them in areas where you maybe land supplies more readily available and build bigger buildings, and the commute kind of gets taken away because everything's done sort of autonomously. So I think it feels like that will come. That feels more natural to me. Moving large amounts of goods at volume on trucks that have no driver, than perhaps delivering via a drone. In terms of logistics. But I can see a sort of natural evolution there. But for sure, powering them is going to be quite tricky. And the other thing that we're seeing a lot at the moment now, actually particularly in Greater London, is with TfL is a real resistance around parking spaces and things like that. So I think that that's something that probably needs to get talked about more, is the real push to get people to travel to work on public transport and things like that, or via electric vehicles. But just in general, kind of, as we move forward, I think just moving people around, in a way which is green and perhaps autonomous, is definitely going to create some pressure, but it's something that we're going to have to face.
Certainly, I mean, you hear of there's driverless taxis. I think is it in the Netherlands, and probably a few of the other countries now. And I'm not sure if I'll feel that comfortable stepping into a driverless car for the moment. But there's obviously been some tests with driverless HGVs. I think maybe up on the M6 I've heard about it. So it's happening. It's whether it's going to become mainstream. When does it become the norm? Is it going to be quicker than we think because we're forced into it, or are there too many challenges that will keep pushing it back? And I think at the moment power is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly right, and power from our perspective is very tricky, and that's always the biggest sort of issue that we have on sites, really, that's sort of completely outside of control, is availability of power. And typically when you're trying to bring it in, it takes a lot longer than you think it might do, and I've known developers have sites where it just isn't available, almost at any cost. So it can really impact on obviously the feasibility of development if you can't get any, or you can't get the right level. And obviously there's more of a push through renewables and things like that, but it's tough. It's a really tough thing to solve, and obviously it's not just logistics parks that are competing with that. It's everyone who's
absolutely
So it's a difficult balance to strike for sure.
But it's I suppose it's little steps, isn't it? I mean, I live in Milton Keynes, and see the little robots driving around doing the shopping, and you sort of everybody was taking pictures of them and sort of thought it's fantastic, and nobody takes any notice of them now. They're
absolutely, and that's only a few years ago, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I stayed in one of the hotels in the middle of Milton Keynes and did exactly that. I did a double take, going, bloody hell's that white thing moving towards me? And I could see some policemen at the back. Nothing to do with it, but they just happened to be there. So I'm thinking they're perhaps playing around with it. Yeah. So I took a picture of it, went in the hotel, and Googled it, and realised that they'd been around for 12 months, and this was probably 3 years ago.
And what's quite interesting is actually Milton Keynes is probably one of the only place, I'm doing a generalisation here, but one of the only places where you probably could introduce that, because the original master plan was the whole network, what they call the Redways, where the biking network around Milton Keynes is set up for that sort of infrastructure. The infrastructure is right for that sort of delivery. But if you go around an inner city, you, like you say, the infrastructure is just not built for it, is it? It's not built for these new approaches, and you have to put them in place first.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite. I was going to mention that because a colleague of ours, he lives in Northampton, and he sent us a video of one not that long ago. It literally looks like a sort of oversized cool box on wheels, really. But where I live up in Worcestershire, I've never seen one of those on a pavement or anything else. But that did feel quite sort of cutting edge, and it's interesting because that never really got seen. If it did, I missed it. But they never really seemed to be publicised in the wider media that much. That was happening. It just sort of got rolled out sort of quite quietly. And then I'm assuming when you're making the order for that thing to come, you're doing that on a smartphone quite quickly, intuitively. Is it one particular retailer that's doing that in MK, or is it?
That's a good question. I don't know actually. I couldn't answer that. I apologise.
Well, the white robots.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a sort of you can
just order it, and
you can order it, and they presume that I don't know where it is. I think when I read that article, it was lots of different people, lots of different retailers can use it, but it was all food, I think, related at the time. But I presume it's now expanded. I don't know.
And there's other things. You've probably got the electric scooters that you just dump anywhere, and again, that was a couple of years ago, and people go to work on them, dump them out the front, and it just take a bit of a leap of faith and try these things, and they get in the general sort of use and general psyche of people, and you use them.
I remember when those electric scooters came out, the first thought was, well, yeah, it's pointless because everyone will just steal them and take them. But actually, you very quickly move past that, don't you? And then there became a sort of its own industry. I remember reading, with guys who would go around and collect the ones that were just left on the side of the road, take them home and recharge them, and you could get paid for that and then drop them back off.
Yeah.
And I think it became quite competitive actually for people to go collect these things and recharge them and then drop them back on the street. And there were lots of guys racing around in trucks trying to fill up the back of the van. But I must admit I've never used one, but they are they're pretty widely adopted now, and it is autonomous, I guess, isn't it? It's that same type of technology.
It's that sort of technology that is available to use instantly, without commitment, without it's available technology that you can use, and it doesn't take long for people. The novelty soon wears off, and people are using them for the right purposes and getting from A to B. They don't always use public transport. It's not that. And it's a great way for people to get around.
Yeah.
Apologies, guys. I'm going to have to drop. Someone's at the front door.
No, there's no problem.
Delivery.
Working from home.
Robot. Yeah.
It's a robot. Thanks, Duncan.
Well, yeah, it's not. It's a pump for a septic tank, so it's urgent.
No
Thank you so much. Anyway, nice to meet you.
No, good to meet Duncan.
Speak to you soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Likewise. Zoe, how are we doing on time? I can't remember what time it was. I can't remember if it was 11:40 or 11:45. We're scheduled to.
You've got to 11:40. You can finish when you're ready, or carry on through. I've got the agenda right in front of me.
Who's on after us?
Let me see. I'm really worried to come off the recording in case I lose it, because it's quite new technology.
It's okay.
But hang on. I'm sure I can. You've got until 11:50. I think you might have a break after that.
Well, Peter, up to you. Happy to chat, or if you want to have a break before.
I'd have to go in about 5 minutes anyway. So, I mean, if you want to break there, Paul, then happy to do
fine.
that.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you joining. Unfortunately, it was only the three of us, but
it's good. It's good to have that, and it's quite. It's good to speak to you both. Really, it's good.
No, that's it. Well, hopefully this time next year it'll happen again, and it will be in person. I can say hello.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Wonderful. All right.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks.
Peter. Bye.